Hello everyone, I'm Hannah Joyce Arsana, your first presenter for this topic that is all about research in child and adolescent development. And as for our learning objectives at the end of this lesson, we'll be able to explain the basic principles of research, demonstrate the appropriation of the rules of the teachers as consumers and producers of developmental research. So these research are just an overview for us that the researcher inside of us will be awakened, that we will be able to remember and love again the beauty of research. By doing that, let us proceed. For the principles of research, there are two. First, teachers as consumers or end users of research. It gives important knowledge to use in policy making. It also enables teachers on what to teach and how to teach. And also, it involves decisions related to educational policies, curriculum, effective learning, and teaching process, and even those involving research. And according to Albert Georgi, research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody has thought. The next, teachers as researchers. Research does not only belong to thesis and dissertation. It is for students and teachers too. So overall, teachers can be both consumers or end users of research and also as researchers. Since we've all tackled about research, it is necessary to talk about scientific method since research is a science inquiry. When we say scientific method, it is one of the important principles in research in adherence to the scientific method since research is a systematic and a logical process. And according to John Dewey, there are 5 steps in scientific method. To begin with, identify and define the problem, the very basic one, and I know we're all familiar with this. After you define your problem and you have the problem, proceed to determine the hypothesis or your educated guess of that problem. And after that, you may proceed to your collect and analyze your data by testing your educated guess by collecting it and analyzing it. Then after that, you may proceed to formulate your conclusions, then apply conclusions to the original hypothesis to find out if your original hypothesis is correct or not. So much for the scientific method. That's all for that scientific method. So let's proceed for our next topic that is all about research design. Researchers provide us valuable information about child and adolescent that are done with high level of quality and integrity that provide us with valuable information about child and adolescent development. And one of the function of research design is to ensure that the evidence obtained enables you to effectively address the researcher's problem as clearly as possible. That's why it is important that you know various research designs and different data gathering which we tackle it later after this research design that is all about data gathering used by developmental researchers. In doing research, we have different designs to do, where in fact there are some kinds of research design that we're going um, to discuss with a total of 8 designs. As you can see, there are 8 research designs that we're going to talk about. And in this research design, we're going to describe them and give some brief description, brief strength, and their brief weaknesses. So moving forward, the case study. Case study, an in-depth look at an individual. It is more on particular research problem rather than a sweeping statistical survey. It was more on very personal because it provides informations about individuals' hope, fears, upbringing, anything traumatic experiences about your family, the health, fantasies, fears, anything about individuals. But its weakness, it really needs exercise when generalizing from the information. Since it only focuses on one individual, it might not be true to other people. I know that we've encountered this case study, so that's all about for the case study. Let's proceed to correlational study. Correlational study, a research design that determines associations. It is useful because the more strongly two events are correlated, the more we can predict one from the other. It was more on a qualitative study. So it is useful as for its strength, useful for two events that are correlated. This is the type of study that is non-experimental research in which a researcher measures two variables, looking for variables that seem to interact with each other. When you see one variable changing, you have fair idea of how the other variable will change. So kung correlated na sila, so from the word itself, correlational, correlated, if kung the more related they are, the more na ay effects sa isa't isa. So something like that, ang correlational study. And for its weakness, it doesn't involve manipulation of factors. Then let's proceed to the experimental study. It determines the cause and effect of relationships. It provides highest level of evidence for single studies and the most common research that we know. It enables the researcher to maintain control over all factors that may affect the result of an experiment. As for its strength, the true reliable method of establishing cause and effect. For example, for the experimental, I know na common na po siya for us. For example, if you really want, if there is really cause and effect between the sunlight and the plant, if naabay effect ang growth sa plants sa sunlight. So, more on experiment siya nga. Similar sila sa correlational, pero ang correlational does not touch any experiment. Likewise, ang experimental, more on quantity. So, mo siya. Ang correlational, quality lang siya. Ang experimental, more on quantity jud siya. So, remember that. Then, as for its weakness, experimental research is limited to what is observable, testable, and manipulable. So we're done with the experimental. And now let's proceed to naturalistic observation. It focuses on children's experiences in natural setting. So naturalistic observation, natural setting, imo siyang ginaobserbahan in a sa natural lang siya na setting. For example, sa classroom na you want to observe your students, how to and how they react or how they interact with the other students, on how they behave inside the classroom and outside the classroom, something like that, na wala kabalo ang imuhang mga estudyante na imuha na silang ginaobserbahan. Kung ang correlational quality siya, experimental quantity, this naturalistic observation was more on narrative report. And as for its strength, a researcher directly observed the subject. It involves recording, counting, describing, and categorize the actions and events. There is no influence coming from the researcher. There is no experimentation because the researcher or the teacher here is observing in natural setting. However, the disadvantage of this natural observation, it can be difficult to determine the exact cause of behavior, and the experimenter cannot control outside variables. So, kana lang siya. Then, moving forward, for the longitudinal research design. So, it studies and follows through a single group over a period of times. It follows the sample over time and makes repeated observations. From the word itself, long. So very long process siya na study. For example, if you want to study the tribes of that specific country, na about their lifestyle, language, and to be able to make that study, you should be there. So very long process yun guys siya. Maybe it was more on a year or decade, something like that. So as for its strength, it record and monitor developmental trends, and it allows the analysis of duration of the particular phenomenon. And as for its weakness, these designs are expensive and time consuming. Yes, but still it is worth it if you want this longitudinal. Why not? So much for the longitudinal. Let's proceed to cross-sectional study. Cross-sectional. Different ages are compared at one time. It is more on reliance on existing difference rather than change following intervention. And also, it allows them to record and monitor developmental trends, but doesn't have to wait individuals to grow. Cross-sectional, it was more on comparing different ages at one time. For example, for the developmental trends, all about using of gadgets between the child and adolescents. So in short, you've touched one topic, which is the using of gadgets in different ages, which is the child and adolescent at one time. So it doesn't wait individuals to grow as long as you have the one topic and you've compared it from child and adolescent or anything that you want. So it was an example of cross-sectional. And as for its weakness, it gives no information how about individuals change. So it was more on focus on studying and drawing inferences from existing difference between people and phenomena. And also as for its weakness, finding people to study that are very similar except in one specific can be difficult. So finding similar topics that touch ages at one time is very difficult, and it gives no information about how individuals change. That's all about for the cross-sectional. Let's proceed to the sequential. Sequential, it was a combine of cross-sectional and longitudinal approaches. So, in combination siya in terms sa cross-sectional, because as mentioned kanina, cross-sectional, it was more on compared compared people from different ages at one time. So it was also the same as sequential, pero mas strong ang sequential. Why? Because it does follow sequence events. For example, the it was discussed in module 3 or 2, the stages of development wherein nag-start siya sa prenatal period, infancy, early childhood, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and the late adulthood. So it was more on sequence siya. So cross-sectional siya kay nag-follow siya og ages but not following the sequential katong nasa stages of development. So, maong related silang duha. And as for longitudinal approaches, longitudinal siya kay since you follow those stages development kay kailangan man siya isunod-sunod, so very long process jud siya. That's why longitudinal approaches naa siya for the progress of sa bata or anything na unsay nakatouch sa imuhang study. And as for its strength, it provides information that is impossible to obtain. It carried an deliberate stages approach where one stage will be completed followed by another, then another, and so on until enough data is gathered. So that's sequential is. And as for its weakness, it is complex, expensive, and time consuming. And also findings is very limited. So much for the sequential. And now let's proceed to the last but not the least, the action research. Action research, a reflective process of progressive problem solving. It is done mostly by the teachers, a very challenging one research because in their classroom wherein there is a problem, then the teacher as a researcher would find a solution to fix or to find a solution for that problem and make an action on it. For example, inside the classroom, you really nakita nimo na there are one students that are mahina yung memorization niya. So by knowing that problem, you will find any solutions like in terms of memorization, you want them to to memorize it by adapting the music, something like that. Any solutions na imuhang mahuna-hunaan. And as for its strength, create changes and gain information. And as for its weakness, takes place in one organization, only time-consuming and complex to conduct. And now, that's so much for the research design. And now let's proceed to data gathering techniques. Data collection is the process of gathering and measuring information on targeted variables in an established systematic function, which then enables one to answer relevant questions and evaluate outcomes. So there are 5 data gathering techniques. First, observation, which is the most effective method because it is straightforward and very efficient. So, more on hit ba niya siya sa laboratories or materialistic settings, pwede din sa classroom or even at home. Next, data gathering techniques, physiological measures, indicators of children's development about their heart rate, hormonal levels, bone growth, and brain activity, and more on many more standardized tests. It assesses individuals' performance in different domains, so more on consistent manner niya siya. And the fourth one, interviews and questionnaires. It involves asking participants to provide information. When we say questionnaires, it was more on a very popular means of collecting data because they are inexpensive and can be conduct face-to-face, through email, telephone, or internet. And as for the interview, it required time and money, pero very fulfilling. Why? Because you na ma-clarify nimo and deep diving into the respondent's answers. So, may direct nimo ma-clarify jud nimo. And as for life history records, it records of information about a lifetime, events, data record on education, work, family, public records, or even interview for your respondents. So that is all about our topic, the research design and the data gathering techniques. That would be all. Thank you.